Hey, welcome to X-Oriente. We're back. And I screwed it up. I immediately I put the titles were completely wrong.
Well,
so
listen,
there's so much to do.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while.
It has been a while. Yeah. So where have we been? Let me relate to you the saga. So the last show was in fact 114, which is what you saw the titles for just now. And it was a great show. We had Nikki Santoro. Samponia. Why did I say Santoro? Was that like a character in a movie? Must have been. Must have been like a... Yeah, anyway.
Santori. You were thinking of Santori?
I don't know. But anyway, Nikki was great. And so during the course of the show, we lost the feed like, I don't know, maybe like 3 times, 4 times.
Oh, yeah.
And then when I finally went back to try to put it all together, there was nothing there. I mean, it was just like bits and fragments and, it just sounded like a bunch of aliens were taking over. And so, so the following week when we tried to do a show, like nothing, like everything, I was getting a spinning beach ball of death, which if you're a Windows person, it's kind of like the blue screen of death, but it just means basically wait. Turns out that the hard drive was failing and it hadn't fully failed, but it was on its way. And so it took...
I'm not dead yet,
but I'm not feeling well. I'm not at all well.
Well, you soon will be.
So the first order of business was to kind of back everything up, make sure everything was backed up. And that took a long time because the hard drive was failing. So once we got that figured out, and then we had to kind of figure out what the problem was. At first I thought it was the connection, and then it turned out not to be the connection. Then it was a question of getting the hard drive replaced. And as an experienced Mac tech myself, I was like, hey, no problem. I'll just replace the hard drive. Well, guess what? The computer, which I'm sitting in front of, the iMac, the 2012 iMac, ever since 2012, they redesigned the computer to be, as Jonathan Ive would say, sleeker and more thin and beautiful and chamfered edges. And the problem with that is that there's no way to open up the computer. You literally have to defeat the glue holding the screen onto the computer, pull the delicate 27-inch glass screen off without breaking it, and then go in through the front, which is crazeballs to me. So even as an experienced Mac tech, I don't have room. I don't have the tools. I don't have anything. So I went over to Apple and I say, Apple, can you swap this out? And it's like, yeah, well, we'll swap it out, but only with exactly what was there originally. And I was like, but what was there originally was garbage. And they're like, all we can do, sorry. So I took it to an independent repair place. They replaced it with a nice SSD. And in the meantime, while all this was going on, this took about a month to get it all figured out, because then the SSD drive was back ordered and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we're back. And while we were doing that, I've been working on putting together a list of show material. We've got about 26 topics in the till. So that's going to be good for everybody.
Yeah.
And I've got a new fun studio background. Hang on, let me see if I can show you guys. Check this out. So if you guys remember me mentioning, so I last summer, actually no, it was the fall of 2017. The fall of 2017, I went to London on a business trip, and I stayed at this hotel called the Andaz on Liverpool Street in London. And it turns out that the Andaz, and I think I mentioned this on an earlier show, it turns out that the Andaz was actually Bedlam. So if you've ever heard of the term Bedlam, like things were Bedlam, well, Bedlam is actually named after a hospital called Bethlehem. Bedlam is sort of the English slangy version of Bethlehem. And it was one of the very first mental hospitals ever. And it didn't have a great reputation of being a mental, like a mental institution.
No, it did not.
And I remember walking through the hotel and seeing like reinforced steel bars like next to the door frames and stuff. And I thought, was this place once a prison? And so when I asked the people that were there, was this place a prison? They said, no, it was a mental hospital. I'm like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense. And it turned out that back in I think it was like 98 or 99 when they bought, when the hotel chain, which I think it's Hyatt, bought Bedlam to turn it into a luxury hotel. They were doing some renovations and they knocked down this wall, and lo and behold, there was a complete and pristine Masonic temple behind that wall. And the Masonic temple had two levels. The upper level was a lodge room, which you see in the background right now. That this is what that lodge room looks like. It was completely untouched. Probably
so cool.
Except for a layer of dust. What you see back in back of me is what there was. And then downstairs, right under that lodge room, was another lodge room that was Egyptian themed that they turned into the gym. And so what they do with this room is they actually have like special events, and like you'll see like tables set up, and they'll do like a
right.
like a wedding party or something like that. So they'll have events here. Right. My only wish is that they were actually using it as a Masonic temple, because it's so.
That'd be so cool.
Wouldn't it? It would be so amazing. But so anyway, so for Hanukkah, my present was a green screen. So actually what you're seeing behind me is a green screen. And so that's allowing us to kind of do this. And I thought it would be kind of cool, like if you wanted to have your lodge,
chroma key.
Right? Chroma key. It's great. So I thought if you want to have your lodge in the background, right? Send us a high resolution picture of it, and we'll see what we can do. So we'll definitely give a shout out to your lodge and put it in the background. And I'm working on getting Jason a green screen. It's the problem is what you see behind Jason right now is pretty much about half of his apartment. So
correct.
So we have to find a green screen that he can live with. So we're gonna work on that. So anyway, so we're back. We're back.
It's awesome.
And I'm really great. I'm really glad we are.
Me too.
Before we get into tonight's topic, I did want to point something out. So, I haven't been terribly active in the Scottish Rite. You're probably a lot more active than I am. No. Okay.
No.
And the reason is because, it's kind of complicated, but, one of the reasons is that, they're just really far away now. So they moved out of Chicago, years ago. They moved out to Bloomington, Illinois, which is sort of a suburb in the west. It's like sort of south and west of Chicago. And
about 25 minutes away
with no traffic, but
right.
During rush hour, it's a good hour and a half. And that's sort of the problem, is that, that they'll have like a meeting that starts at 7. If I get out of there, if I'm lucky, I can get out of there at 5, get out of work at 5:30. There's no way that I can get there and make it in time for the program. So, it's been really difficult for me to do that. And so, a lot of people who sort of are, in Chicago Masons, they've been kind of distancing themselves from the Scottish Rite, and in Chicago especially, but in the North in general. And, it's been kind of a bit of a butt of some jokes, but I have to say, we've got a new Grand Commander, and they've been doing some really, really positive things. So I got my copy of the Northern Light, right? Which is their magazine. And it's a lot better than it used to be. I mean, some of the stuff is really good. I think that what's interesting is that they've kind of rededicated themselves. They've got a kind of a clear mission now, which is to take care of the brethren. And I'm not sure how I feel about that yet. Like, I'm not sure if that's the right one, but I think it's a pretty good one. Like they're going to have to figure out how to kind of reconcile the sort of the ritual character of the Scottish Rite, sort of that French character, with their stated mission. But I like it. And one of the things that I got with my Northern Light, which I'm really kind of excited about, is this. So what this is the Scottish Rite 2018 Impact Report. And basically what they do, it's kind of like an annual report. They go through and they say, here are all the charities that we're supporting, and here's where your money's going. And here's where here's what good it's doing. What a great idea.
The South has been doing that for it's got to be close to a decade now. The deputy grand commander in the South is a CPA, And so he was like, why are we not giving information to our members? I want to say it was about 6 years ago. I'm going to guess at that. It might have been maybe a little bit more, maybe 8. At any rate, but he's been doing that, and he puts it all together in nice pie chart graphs forms. They make nice infographics, and it's a really, really popular thing, because who'd have guessed people like to know where their money's going? Go figure.
Yeah, and it's nice to know, like, where, you know, what the various charities are. So if you're you know, if you're inclined to donate or give, you know,
yeah, absolutely,
you know where to give to.
Sure.
So yeah, so we're back, and let's we're going to talk today. So there's a lot of stuff. I mean, good Lord. I mean, I think we last met, we last did a show
in November.
Yeah, it was like before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And a lot's happened since then. Mainly there's been a lot of really interesting essays being written in, you know, Mason, what do you call it? Like Masondom?
Sure.
Among the brethren.
Yeah, sure. In the blogosphere, in the Mason blogosphere.
The Masonic blogosphere.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and so one of them I thought was actually there's 3 of them, and let me just kind of call them up here. So 2 of them are written by a guy that I don't know him very well. I don't think we've ever met face to face, but one of the groups that I hang out in, inexplicably to me, is the Texas Freemasons group. I mean, I have a lot of friends in Texas. I'm not entirely sure why, but you know, they always get something kind of interesting, sometimes disturbing. And there's a brother out there, by the name of Lance Kennedy, and Lance is, he's definitely one of the good ones. Very intelligent guy. I think he's Ivy League educated. I believe he's an attorney. But he's a thoughtful dude, and he wrote a couple of essays, which I thought were interesting. And then Greg Stewart wrote another one, and our good friend Chris Hodap, you know, highlighted these on his blog, and I read them, and I was thought we should talk about these, especially on our return show. And I originally, so the show is actually, like, you know, aside from the fact that the titles are wrong, my original working title for the show is "We're Dying Again." Right. Every once in a while, like, and it's funny. It's like I'm coming up on this 2019 is going to be my 20th year as a Mason. So I wouldn't say that I'm an old Mason, but I've been around it long enough to see that these kind of things kind of come in waves, right? So there's this whole, like, we're doomed, we're dying. Oh, there's some hope, you know, and then, oh, we're doomed, we're dying. Right. Oh, look, there's some hope. Yep. And so we seem to be kind of in a we're doomed, we're dying phase again. And so there were these essays that were written. One of them is, I think Lance wrote, is called "Is Freemasonry is Dying?" And in it, and we'll include links to the show notes in the show notes.
No, Lance's were "The Decline of Freemasonry: A Data Analysis" and "Two Trajectories for American Freemasonry: Consolidation or Implosion." And then the Greg Stewart piece was "The Death of Freemasonry: When Change Changes You."
Yeah. So let's start with Lance's essay. How would you describe it? Like, what would you?
Well, all right. So in my opinion, it's really a 2-parter, and it starts at the Decline of Freemasonry data analysis, where what Lance did is that he took the publicly available data from the Masonic Service Association of North America, MSANA, and MSANA gets data from Grand Lodges every year. They politely ask every year around this time for Grand Lodges to list their membership data and send it to them. and then they compile it and they kind of keep track of it over time. Lance got that data and wanted to kind of play with it and see what kind of stories it could tell. What's interesting and I think is really important, and I'm really impressed that actually he did this, is that he pointed out the unreliability of the data. It's all self-reported, number one. So you have to be really careful of that. And then number two is that there are no set definitions as to what does membership mean. Is that bodies? Is that, souls? Or is it every lodge that you're a member of counts multiple times as a membership, right?
Yeah, so membership doesn't necessarily equal Masons.
That's correct. That's exactly right. And so the example I was going to give is in DC. We have, let's see, I don't have it up right now. We've got roughly 4,000 Masons memberships, but we have, I think, like 3,000 Masons. So those are two very different numbers. And so there's some unreliability, but it's the best data that's out there. Unfortunately. So he kind of takes it and says, listen, here's your caveat, but now let's get on with it and see if we can find some information from it. And then he basically goes on to just say, yeah, our membership is declining and precipitously. It's not a great story. And at some point, we're going to turn into something like the Odd Fellows, which is an organization that limps on. It is alive, absolutely, but it is on dire life support. It has very few members. It has a lot of money, a lot of property and things like that. But there's almost no interest in it. And so he says that that's basically where we're going. And that first article really lays out his argument that, yeah, we are dying and you better wake up to the fact that we are. So that's that. The second article is much different. It builds on the idea that we're dying, but then says, now what? What do we do? What's the future hold? And he uses, I think, an incredibly good device in the story of Detroit and Pittsburgh, and about how Pittsburgh and Detroit were once, the shining diamonds of the steel belt in America. They're both industry towns built on factories and big business. Detroit on cars and Pittsburgh on steel. Mm-hmm. Well, we all know that obviously didn't last. And steel production is way, way down in the United States. We just don't consume as much steel as we used to,
right?
For a bunch of different reasons. And the American automotive industry has just taken a nosedive. It has not fared its competition well, and has made some big mistakes along the way, and so they've paid the price for that. So these two cities are essentially dying, and his story is a really, really interesting one, because Pittsburgh is making a resurgence. Detroit is not. Frankly, everyone says, well, Detroit, it's right around the corner, it's going to get better. It's not. Detroit is still dying. My wife is really interested in Detroit. She likes real estate and stuff like that. And Detroit has pages and pages and pages on the web of homes that are for sale, like online auctions that you can buy for like $50.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I have a close friend of mine bought an amazing piece of property on a lake.
Yep.
For like a song, you can get amazing
absolutely.
deals up there.
You certainly can. And that's because no one's there, and that's just that's the sad truth of it. In Pittsburgh has rebounded nicely. I think their population is starting to go up again. Mm-hmm. It's now, in the last year or two, made a bunch of lists of like hot new cities that are on the come. And it is. I've been there. It's a really vibrant, alive city. Detroit, not so much. And his point in here is that you can go the way of Detroit or you can go the way of Pittsburgh.
So what is the way of Pittsburgh? So if Pittsburgh was what did Pittsburgh do?
Well,
that was such a great thing.
Well, so his argument towards the end of this article is essentially that one of the big reasons is it's consolidation, right? So what you've got is Pittsburgh has a dense city center that they invested in. There were a lot of businesses down there. There were people that lived down in that city center area, whereas Detroit is much more spread out. Especially, and that's just a cultural thing for those two cities. In Detroit, a lot of the audio executives and middle class moved out of the city. So the city was primarily just there to go to your office, right? And what happens is that when the population starts to take a nosedive, now you've got nobody in a city and nobody in the burbs. So you've got nobody. Pittsburgh had lots of people downtown. They had everyone was compacted in much closer. And so when they started to have problems, other industry picked up because they were more dense in that city center. And I think what he's trying to say about Masonry in that sense is that return to what you do best. Go back to basics. Build again. And what he means by that in here is ritual. It means the initiatory experience. Do it better. Go back to fundamentals, as they like to say in sports. And I think that's probably the best prescription I've heard. It's not a new one in any way.
I'm a little
but
skeptical,
it's a good one.
But yeah, okay.
I'm not. I'm really not. And here's why: is because it is Occam's razor. It is the most obvious solution to the problem, which is just do better, right? If you're not doing well, do better. And to do better, by focusing on the initiatory experience, by doing that really well for our new members, those that we are picking up, hopefully we keep them longer, we keep them engaged longer. And that, I think, is where he's going with that. I think it's a very, very smart plan. Is it the only thing that we need to do? No, but it's certainly a really big first step. I'm interested to hear what you have to think about it, because I think that you're skeptical of it. Is it because it's too simple?
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that, when I look at, because I thought this is a very interesting thing, because I have friends in Pittsburgh, and I came close to moving there several times.
It's a great town.
It's a great town. It really is. And but one of the things that they had that Detroit doesn't have is Carnegie Mellon University. Right? Carnegie Mellon is like it's a huge, it's sort of like you've got Stanford,
MIT,
they've got and Carnegie Mellon. They're churning out a tremendous amount of scientists, and they have an amazing design school out there. Mm-hmm. In fact, my friends teach out there in the university. A lot of tech comes out of there. So they had something, they had an educational hub that they could start to rebuild the city around. And if you look at the dominant industry in Pittsburgh, right, there's a lot of tech there. There's a lot of and then, when you get programmers that are kind of living there, and you get startups, and then the next thing that happens is you get like microbreweries, and you get, you get great restaurants, and you get, and it kind of creates this virtuous cycle that starts to build up the city.
Right.
And so, I think the problem is that, like, and I think what Detroit, now I'm not going to talk in terms of like statistics and economics, but sort of in terms of the soul of the city, right? What Detroit is Detroit said, well, we're the motor city, we make cars. And if we just make better cars, we'll fix all of our problems. Right?
Well,
and I think Pittsburgh realized we can't, there's no way to make better steel. Like we can't just make better steel.
That's true.
We have to do something else. We have to do something different.
But Eric, also, the point is that when they said, hey, we just need to make better cars, well, they didn't. They made worse cars. They kept compounding their errors. So while that may actually have worked had they made better cars.
I don't think so. I don't think I don't think that's true. I think that
it's
did.
Absolutely true. They're terrible cars.
No, dude. No, trust me, man. I drive a Ford. I like, it's been super. It's super
American
reliable.
car companies are getting killed, and they've been getting killed since the 80s because they are very, very large bureaucracies on top of being big businesses. And so they can't move. They're not nimble. And they've been behind the curve on trends in cars since the 80s when everyone went for an Econo box.
I think in the 80s that was true. I think in the 90s that was true. I think starting in 2008, 2010.
Too late.
No. Here's what I think happened though.
20 years of failure.
But let me just make my point. My point is that cars is not Detroit.
Well,
right?
True. Right.
And that's what happened.
You're 100% right.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that the where they actually manufactured those cars weren't necessarily in Detroit. Some of that was in Detroit, some of it was in Alabama, some of it was in Texas.
Yeah, there you go.
Right? So
sure.
So as the supply chain and the parts and all that stuff left Detroit, right? Because for places that had better infrastructure, better weather, stuff like that. I mean, originally Detroit was where Detroit was because you had the coal coming in from into Chicago, from Minnesota and from from out west. You had the steel from Pittsburgh, and it all kind of converged on Detroit. Well, if the steel ain't coming from Pittsburgh anymore, you don't really need Detroit to be where Detroit is.
That's true.
Right? You need it to be closer to the water, right?
Yep,
so
right.
So that's my point is that I think that just look, I'm a big believer in ritual. I think ritual proficiency is a great thing and it's a foundational thing for Freemasonry. But I don't think doing better ritual
it's not a panacea.
It's not going to fix the problems of Masonry. I think we have to be doing things differently. Like I think we needed to, if the lessons of Pittsburgh teach us anything, it's that you have to just look at what you've got and say, what are our strengths and what do we have to work with? And then figure out a new way to do that while still having a nod to what we used to have. Right. So like you go to Pittsburgh and it's not, look, it's not a gleaming white shining city on a hill, like, all modernist and like they tore down old Pittsburgh and built it up again. Right. It's just, but it's different. Like the vibe is different. Yeah. Right. The reason you go to Pittsburgh is different. Right. And I think we need to do the same with Masonry as well.
I think it's really interesting, Eric, is because, so I was home for Christmas, back in Milwaukee, and I haven't been back home in a few years, and Kristen and I took a drive around town just to kind of go and see where we used to live and things like that, and just to check out what's changed, what's new. And I was shocked is that Milwaukee is doing really well. Basically it is what would happen if Brooklyn could just keep getting bigger, if it could just spread out a lot. It's tons and tons of cool little shops and restaurants. It's such a lively scene. It's lots of new ideas and new things happening there. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, this is not what I remember at all. And what's really funny is in my experience, here I am, big city guy in Washington, D.C., everything here is chains, and devoid of personality. But back home in Milwaukee, everything was independently owned. Even their chains are local chains, and it had a vibrancy to it that was really cool. And I guess thinking about Masonry in those terms is that what we need are better lodges, quite frankly. Right?
Yes.
And the thing is that those lodges need to be local. They need to have that flair. They, we can't just sit here and prescribe to a lodge like, well, you know, you'll all wear suits and blah
tuxedos
blah blah.
for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. White tie and tails. Only candles will be lit in our lodge room. That's fine if you've got the people to support it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think that a better lodge is a relative idea, and it's what's better is what works for that lodge. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was thinking about with that stuff, because, you know, we need to be more individualistic. We need to focus on the lodge. And again, I want to go back, because not letting you get away with it, the ritual is really important. That initiatic experience is super important. It's foundational.
Yeah, it's foundational.
What
I agree.
We are.
I agree.
Without that portion, we're the Rotary.
Yeah, no, I agree. And here's what I would say. The ritual, like, and I'm bringing back the metaphor of my recent trauma with the Macintosh, right?
Sure. Okay.
The metaphor is the glue. The ritual is the glue inside the computer that holds it all together, right?
Sure.
But that glue doesn't make the computer function, right?
No, you're 100% right.
It holds it together.
It's an important piece. It's an important piece.
Yeah, because without it, like, you just have a bunch of broken glass and, you know, stuff, right? But that was sort of my takeaway was that the people who are just sort of saying, you know, if only we did ritual better, that would solve everything. And the problem is that when you're irrelevant from the outside, having great ritual on the inside, it doesn't, you know, because here's the thing, like, you bring in a guy, right? Mm-hmm. And he goes through the intake process, and you initiate him, and the very first thing you say to him is, you can't say anything about what you've had, you know, what you've done here. So if he's had a great lodge experience, the best he can do to tell his friends is to go out there and say, it was a great experience. That's all he can say. He can't say anything else. It was a great experience. What was the experience? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but here's the thing: that's not all the truth. I mean, that's the truth, but it's not all the truth, because the thing is that, and we've talked about this before, but that Freemasonry basically is a living version of the mystery box, right? And so that's what makes it work. That's what makes it work, is you can't tell anybody about it. You can go and you can say, like, yeah, it was great, but you have to do it yourself.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's what makes it work so well.
Well, but so here's what I'd say. That's the glue, right? That's the glue.
All right.
But if there's nothing else,
it's not the glue. It's the gas in the engine. Well, it makes it go.
But if there's nothing else,
makes it go.
If there's nothing else there, all you have is gas and glue. You have volatile chemicals. That's all.
You're.
No. I'm not trying to be contrarian. What I'm saying is that that stuff is important, because without it, you're just like any other club. Right. You might as well just be a social club or a Rotary or whatever. Right.
I don't open Facebook because I just realized that we weren't watching Facebook.
Yeah, no, I've been looking at the comments.
Have you?
Actually, yeah,
really?
Mike Ambrecht is he's
here.
This, isn't he? He's and he and Jeff Dyer are having kind of an interesting and John Ruark is around. Yeah. And they're kind of talking about, like, you know, Masonic esoteric education is a big part of the life of the lodge, and I would say yes, that is for some lodges. Lodges,
sure, and the biggest problem that I have with esoteric education and stuff like that is that it's really easy to go off the deep end in that stuff.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a sane, smart person who's well read and well versed in what they're talking about, you're either going to get wrong information or wacko crazy time, which is just as bad as wrong information, in my opinion. So you got to be really careful with that. Esoterics. anytime anyone brings that up and they're like, well, we need more esoteric education in our lodges. Yeah, well, great. But where are you going to get it? Right. Who are your authorities that you're, listening to? Because that's really important when you're studying those things.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's a tough one.
So,
tall order.
So Greg kind of chimed in, Greg Stewart.
Okay.
He is, I believe, one of the Midnight Freemasons.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, he's on Freemason Information.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Freemason Information. Like I said, we'll have all the links in the show notes so you can go read the articles. But he had a really interesting article called The Death of Freemasonry When Change Changes You. And he had kind of an interesting and somewhat, I don't know, I'd say a bit of a radical solution. Right? So he's basically, what he's saying is we need to kind of consolidate and do away, so the idea is that we are attached to a lodge, and the problem is that the lodges, the sheer weight of all these lodges, are bringing us down. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, you are. Yeah, that's exactly what
right.
My eyes kind of went.
And so his thing is you should be able to be a Mason without having to be a member of a lodge,
which is a cool idea, actually.
Okay. Oh, this is going to be good radio.
Oh yeah. It's a cool idea. Well, here's my thing, right or wrong. I'm not making a value judgment on if I agree with it or not.
Yeah.
But it's a cool idea.
Yeah.
And here's why, is because any idea that I'm reading that makes my eyes go, oh, geez, that's a cool idea.
Okay.
Do I agree with it? I don't know. I don't know. Because I think that, again, let's go back, right? Our prescription was better lodges. Can't have better lodges if you don't have members in the lodges. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Right. And so logically, it kind of doesn't work.
But what if there were no lodges?
Well, then there'd be no Masonry. That's just silly.
No. What if you just had one lodge? What if you had a Grand Lodge? What if you're just a member of a Grand Lodge? Because I think that's kind of where he's going, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't think he was going that far. I think he was saying, listen, for a period of time, you can stay unaffiliated, which actually is true for the most part. You can be a Masonic free agent, I think, for a year before Grand Lodges tell you have to make a choice. But how
do they know? Do they know? Do they actually know?
It's your dues card, sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You can't produce a dues card. And so what happens is that if you withdraw, right, from your lodge, so let's take Washington, for example, right? I withdraw from all my Washington lodges. I am a Masonic free agent. I don't have dues cards anymore because I don't belong to any lodges. So instead, what you get is a certificate of good standing issued by the Grand Lodge, and that good standing is valid for 1 year, and that's it. And then when that thing fails, boy, you better have found a place to land, because now you've got nothing. So, to be a Mason, you got to pay dues. That's just how that works.
Right.
And so I mean, to an extent, you can be a member of the Grand Lodge, as kind of a Masonic free agent, but you can only do it for actually, it's probably less than a year.
So what would happen if you just paid your dues to a Grand Lodge? So instead of paying $200 a year to, Urban Silk Stocking Lodge that you never go to because you might not live in the area, or it might be too far away from you. You just pay $30 a year to be a member of the Grand Lodge, and then you don't get the privileges of being I think that's what Greg is. I think that's what his point is, right?
But I mean, you can only do that for so long, I think. I mean, you can't do that permanently. And I don't think that that's what he was prescribing. I think he was saying, listen, you could, for a period of a couple of years, if there should be a little cap on it. But hey, if you want to just be unaffiliated, go for it. I'm kind of okay with that, I think. Did you see Juan's comment? The Ouroboros of Freemasonry. We need better lodges for strong membership, and we need strong membership to make good lodges.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
That's true.
It is.
but I would say, so here's kind of my take on this. I would say that the lodge is the most important thing. More important than the member, more important than the Grand Lodge. It is the most important thing. It is the foundational unit of Masonry. You can have Freemasonry without a Grand Lodge. I know that sounds sacrilegious, but you can have Freemasonry without a Grand Lodge. You can have Freemasonry without a lot of members. You cannot have Freemasonry without a lodge. The lodge is the foundational unit of Freemasonry in my book, right? And it's sort of like in a marriage, and I've said this to many friends who, are getting married. My wife and I are blessed with, we're entering into our 25th year of marriage, right? And so people say, well, and I work in a very young industry. So when people hear that, they're like, what, did you get married when you were 12? Like, yes, she was an arranged bride. Right. But what I say to people is I say, the secret to a happy marriage is you have to realize that there's three people in any marriage, right? There's you, there's her, and there's the marriage. And of those three people, the most important one for longevity is the marriage, right? Correct. They get 2 votes, right? To your 1.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I feel about lodges, right? Like the lodge. And I think when you look at how people behaved in years past, that was true for them, right? The lodge was a place of pride. The lodge was a place where, yes, you paid your dues, but you went above and beyond. You might donate furniture. You might make things for the lodge. You might decorate. The lodge, the lodge that I visited in Bath, Ontario. They the wives of the members did needlepoint to make chair upholstery for the chairs in the east, west, and south, right? So people contributed to the lodge because the lodge was a part of their identity. And I think we've kind of lost that.
It should be I think where you're going with that is that it should be part of your community.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
And a part of your identity. So the
that's
lodge,
absolutely right.
The lodge is the thing that, the lodge is the baby, right? Freemasonry is not the baby. The lodge is the baby. And if you do everything in your power to make sure that you have a strong lodge, you will have a strong lodge. You will have a strong lodge. I agree
with that. I totally agree with that. I think too that I think that Greg, I like his idea of. I mean, it's a little. You're absolutely right. By the end of this thing, you're doing this the whole time, going, "Oh my God, what are you talking about?" But I like he basically calls out and says we ought to be yanking charters a lot faster and more than we do now. And I have to agree. Yeah, I really do.
No, I do too.
I think that that struggling lodges create struggling Masons and have a lot of burnout. Recently a friend of mine went to a lodge that the lodge said to him, "Hey, we'd like you to come in. You're a young guy. We'd like you to come in and help us. We're, a little struggling. It's not terrible, but we're struggling a little bit. We'd like you to come, and be in line. Maybe be master next year. Not this year, but maybe next year." And he went to the lodge meeting for elections, and they were like, "Yeah, you're not on the ballot. We just decided that we don't want to do that." And he was just like,
Wait,
you
came
want my help,
to me.
and then right. And you do this to me? Like, come on, really? And you wonder why. That's the kind of lodge I'm talking about. You didn't just turn off a member. You pissed him off. He's not just going to be like, "Oh, it didn't work out there." No, he's going to go and complain about it. People will know,
Yeah.
And that's bad. When
No,
you're
it's
doing
terrible
that,
because you know what? There's an old marketing
it's a poisonous
adage.
lodge.
Yeah, there's an old marketing adage that people will tell 3 friends if they have a good experience and 10 friends if they had a bad experience. And that's true.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely. So so you're right. The lodge is where to be, and it's what we ought to be focusing on. But I think that it's important to note that fixing your lodge or being trying to revive your lodge, there is no panacea for that. You
No.
know, you
No,
can you can go back to basics. You know, you can listen to your old Uncle Jay and do ritual really well. Treat your new members really well. But again, you know, you've got to do more than just that. But it's a good place to start.
Right. Right. And that's
yeah.
So you mentioned, you know, pulling charters. And I think that's, you know, especially for a lot of Grand Lodge, you know, people in Grand Lodges, that's a very scary thing. Right. But I do like what
nobody wants to be that guy. You know, no one wants to be that Grand Master who runs roughshod over his grand jurisdiction, yanking people's charters and closing lodges. No Grand Master. And think about it this way too. I mean, and this is slightly political, I guess, but think about it this way, because the reality of it is that you wait for how long to be Grand Master? You do how much work?
Oh yeah, it's like
to
20
be Grand
years.
Master.
It's like 20-year process.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you're the guy that's got to be the asshole. Do you know what I'm saying? No Grandmaster wants to do that. Sure. And they will fight tooth and nail to not do that. Because, you know, it ruins their year. They only get 1 year at it, you know? Unless you're Rex Hutchinson, then you just start yanking charters. But he's special.
Well, I think even when he did it, he ran into
he did. He did, and he hated having to do it, but he had to do it. You know, so yeah, but it's tough. I mean,
the question is like, what do you put in its place, right? And so, what I kind of liked was, so when we had Heather Fulton on the show, this is about a little more than a year ago.
Sure. Yeah.
So she was for those who don't know, she was she's a female Mason. She is a member of LaDroit. She's out of Oregon. She's a member of Droit Humaine. She is a member of a lodge, I think, in Seattle?
Yeah.
Right. So she's got to travel across state lines to get to her lodge because of obviously LaDroit Humaine is a lot smaller than, mainstream Masonry.
She said it's an hour or 2 or 3 to get there. I mean, it's a significant drive.
Yeah. So what they do is they have a circle. They call it a circle, where they have, where they get together, they study Masonry. They basically do everything except open the lodge, close the lodge and confer degrees. That is done by the lodge. So the idea would be like you would, and I think we've talked about this on an earlier show, you would put the arresting charter into some kind of a suspended animation. You would create criteria and you say, look, for the next year, you're a circle until you can A, get your membership up, B, demonstrate ritual proficiency. There's a list of 10 things you got to do to be a healthy lodge. And when you demonstrate that you guys have it under control where you can do those 10 things and you have the critical mass of people to do it, you get your charter back. Until then, your charter is going to be in care of this other lodge. And by the way, your dues are going to go to them, right? So that they can support you.
That's right. Yeah, we
or a portion of their dues.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that to me is, but I think the idea that to say, well, there's just too many lodges and we just need to allow people to not affiliate, right? I think that's sort of the death of, that's what's killing churches, right? That's what's killing churches and synagogues, right? Is people just, and it's funny, but you can be a Catholic, right? And never pay a tithe and it's not, right. And, but man, in Judaism, synagogues live and die by their membership. If you're not a member, there's no central authority that can inject money into you until you're back on your feet again, or
Right. What's funny is that I think of these 3 papers, they all really did talk about money a lot.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But I don't think money is a problem in any way, shape, or form, really. Aside from the fact that I agree with their analysis that Grand Lodges don't charge enough assessment on their lodges to be a member of the Grand Lodge. The assessment is so obnoxiously low.
Yeah.
And they don't have that problem in England. And if you look at UGLE, especially in the last couple of years, they have completely professionalized their Grand Lodge structure. They have an executive director that runs the place, who is a hired employee and well compensated. They really do things well, and they do it right. But it costs a lot of money to do that.
Mm-hmm. But they're only one Grand Lodge.
Right. And
right.
But if you look, so a good friend of mine, who's actually a trustee here in DC for our Grand Lodge, showed me, he's a member of a lodge in Chelsea, showed me his assessment page that they sent him for his dues notice. And the whole page is just Grand Lodge fees that he has to pay. And it's something like 120 pounds of Grand Lodge fees. And then he's got to pay his lodge dues, and he's like, and I gladly do it because they give me, I get a good magazine out of it. I get a ton of stuff back from this Grand Lodge, and it's worth it. You've got an executive director now who's on Twitter and will take all comers. It's impressive. It's really impressive what happens when you've got some money and you do some professional things. So I kind of agree there, but I don't agree that money is the problem, because, especially for a lodge, money's not going to solve anything for you. Your membership needs to solve it for you. So that's all I got to say about that. I just think that money is a cop out.
So Juan Sepulveda, of the Winding Stairs Masonic podcast, he's in the comments, and he poses an interesting question. He says that opens room for a question: which churches are thriving because not all are dying? Well, I would say the Mormon church is doing pretty well.
They're doing really well.
Yeah. I would say there are most. So one of the things that's
Joel
kind of interesting,
Osteen's doing pretty great.
Yeah, Joel Osteen's doing pretty great. But most churches are in decline. Even like the mega churches had their moment.
Absolutely.
They're now starting to struggle. The Catholics are struggling. Everybody's struggling, and part of that, I think, is just because people are less. I think they're more isolated. It's kind of interesting. Like a lot of this stuff, like, clicks together, and I wish I had the wherewithal to do a show that shows how all this, that showed the wall with the photos on it and the yarn everywhere that just shows all the connections between I call those crazy walls, the person running them is crazy,
No one who puts string together on a wall is sane.
Yeah, Jeff Dyer says the fundamentalist churches are growing. Actually, if you look, they're shrinking.
Yeah,
they are shrinking too. Yeah, the fundamentalists are shrinking too. Yeah, because what's happening is you're getting a lot of younger people who are not. They're not on board. They're not. There's a big and without me getting like too political here, there's a big disconnect from what like Jesus is talking about and what the fundamentalist churches are doing in terms of the politics and how they're dealing with things like, people who are divorced, people who are gay, people who are of different races and stuff. It's, guns, things like that. They're seeing this sort of disconnect. And I think a lot of people, there's a very good article, which I have to read a little closer. I just one of my colleagues sent it to me earlier today about sort of the millennial, it's about millennial burnout. And one of the things they said is that like millennials are just, there's so much on their shoulders that they're just saying, you know what, screw it. And they're opting out. And I think that's kind of what is, there is behind this sort of decline. Jeff says, but we should not become a substitute for a member's church. Well, so one of the things that's kind of, I think, interesting about Masonry is that the whole system of lodges and churches, there's a lot of similarities there. And, like, for example, I was really shocked to find out, I was working with a guy who's heavy into the Episcopal Church, that they had wardens and deacons and stewards and, I'm like, oh, you mean we didn't invent those things? Like it turns out that no, we modeled a lot of our structure on that of a church. And it if you think about what a church is, there's nothing like super like religious, like in terms of like God about a church. Like God doesn't say, this is how you're going to structure your church. You're going to have a pope. You're going to have a bunch of bishops. That's all stuff we do. That's all stuff that people do. Right. So to look at like the Masonic structure and to say, are there similarities to a church or a synagogue? Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, we have a the sect of Judaism that I'm a part of, is the conservative movement. That's pretty much more or less headquartered in New York. And there's a Jewish theological seminary out there, and they pretty much call the shots in terms of what's allowed and what's not. And then there are constituent, synagogues around the country, around the world that, we have kind of a loose definition, a loose agreement on what's allowed and what's not. And it's very similar to like how a Grand Lodge works. Some part of our dues, and when we we send dues over to JTS to support them, and that's where we get our rabbis from, right? So,
there you go.
So I think there are similarities, but I think that to me, like, if something had to go, like one of the things that concerns me is like, I think that we kind of have maybe too many Grand Lodges. Right. I think that in the early days of the country, I think it made absolute sense to make each state sovereign, because they were super concerned about like, having a bunch of, tradesmen in New England, like calling the shots for a bunch of farmers in Georgia. But those days are long past. And I'm not advocating that we dismantle Grand Lodges. I don't think that would work. No. Right. But I think that it makes it problematic, because now you're almost in competition with the Grand Lodge for funds and resources, where you should really be just sort of laser focused on your individual lodge.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree with that more. Looking back at this, Mike says, I missed it. Damn.
What did
Mike had a good comment before. I don't know. I missed it, and I can't.
They want more than churches can offer. Masonry offers a wider scope. No, not that one.
It's the one that went away. That just went away. Oh well.
About leadership. I can scroll. I can scroll. Like
you can scroll.
I can scroll.
Look at that.
Yeah, I can scroll.
That's nice. I can't scroll. Okay, yeah. So
it says they want more than churches can offer. Masonry offers a wider scope of information on mysteries than churches. Was that one, or was it?
No. It was the one on leadership. But
he says now our system of lodge management, if done correctly, can teach leadership. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely, Mike.
Great point.
And we should be. That should be front. Like when someone says, "Why should I become a Mason?" Because we teach leadership.
100%.
Cha-ching.
Not just teach leadership, but give experience in leadership.
Yeah.
Free, easy experience being a leader. That is absolutely 100% true and really important. Yeah. Okay.
And he says, of course, you still need the teachings of your church. Yeah, and like I said, ritual, and our ideas are foundational. Like to have a lodge without them is just it's not. Yeah. But I think that one of the things that we need to sort of shift our mindset from, and we'll do future shows on this. I think this is kind of a big idea that's worth exploring, is this idea of shifting our focus. Like we grow up, and I don't think we realize it, but we are in a consumer mindset.
Yes.
Right.
Oh. 100%.
Right. And so when we ask the question, is what we're getting worth what we're putting in? Right. As soon as I hear that, I'm like, that's the wrong question. That is the wrong question.
I agree.
Right? Because as soon as you start making that cost benefit analysis, you're a consumer. Right. And then it becomes easy to just say, you know what, screw this. I'm out of here. I'm done. Right. As opposed to just saying, the lodge is a foundational part of me and my family, just as my church is, just as my state is, just as my, right?
Well, right. And you're not just a consumer if you're working, right? Yeah. So you should be putting work into your lodge. And that's not a consumer relationship.
No, that's ownership. That's stakeholdership.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so I have a huge problem with that too, because you're not a consumer of this. You're not passive in any way. Where you're just like, well, I'm making my choice based on price and value judgments. No, you're not.
Yeah.
because you're going to lose every time. I mean, every time you look, and you could be at the best lodge in the world, and it's not a great purchase. You know what I'm saying? If you're a consumer.
Yeah, no.
But if you're an owner, if you've got some ownership, you're trying to, if you're putting your stake in it, then yes, it's worth it. It always is worth it. So yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think that whole idea of consumerism masonry is crap.
Yeah.
There, I said it.
Cool. So we just hit an hour. It's flown by. So we'll end it here. We got a lot of really great stuff to do and to talk about. We're going to have we're lining up guests. It's going to be a great season. Hopefully all these technical issues are behind us. I want to leave you guys with one thought, right? And this is something that, I think I'd mentioned before, I did some work. I did some work for Facebook some years ago, or not years ago. It was last year. What am I saying? Years ago. Last year, I think it was in the spring, like maybe early summer. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I saw, one of the things that they do, which I think is adorable, is they have they're almost like propaganda posters. They're like sort of parodies of propaganda posters from like the war and stuff. And so they anybody's really free to like submit them, and they go and print them en masse, and they put them up everywhere. But there was this one poster that really like stopped me. And in fact, I think somebody stole one from Facebook and put it up in our office, and it hangs in our office. And that is, the best way to complain is to make things.
Love it.
Right?
It's so great.
The best way to complain is make things.
That's great.
And I kind of want to like hoist that just below the G over every master's chair in the lodge.
Yeah. 100%.
And just say, look, Mason, you want to complain? That's cool. What are you going to make? Mm-hmm. You bring your piece of work to the lodge, and I will listen to your complaint. Until then, go make something.
Damn tootin'.
Damn tootin'.
I love it.
All right, you guys. Well, listen, thank you for sticking with us. Thanks for everybody who showed up tonight. What I'm going to do is, now that we've got, the social media and part of the software working again, everything seems to be working just fine. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, I mentioned this to you. We have a new logo. Like, I designed a new logo, right?
Yeah.
So we'll get that kind of going. In fact, we got some learning how to use After Effects. So we might actually have some like 3D cool, Kabbalistic opening credits and stuff. Green screen. Yep. It's going to be great. We're going to make Star Wars here, like just through the show. But and then next week we have some new executive producers that we'll recognize. But you'll definitely want to stay in touch. If you like what you hear and you want to talk back to us, you can always reach us at xoriente@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on Facebook or on YouTube. Next week we should talk about, I'm thinking like maybe we should just stream directly into YouTube. We should give that some thought. So, what do you think? If you're listening to this live, or you're, you watch this later on, does it matter to you whether we stream to YouTube or, exclusively, or, we can be on Twitch as well. There's all kinds of options. We just want to reach the most people we can. If you like the show, please consider leaving a positive review on iTunes. We are available everywhere you get your great podcasts, including Spotify. You can just ask, the Amazon Echo to play X-Oriente, and she should be able to find it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I missed. I think that's it. So anyway, until next week.
Fiat Vox, everyone.
Fiat Vox, everybody.